Welcome to the visual div. Yes, Ailín, you should stop talking. I have to do the introduction now. Anyway, welcome to another episode. My name's Matt, and I'm here with my co-host Ailín. How you doing, Ailín?
Yeah, good. Good. I just about shut up before we went live there, seeing the countdown going on. So, yeah, I'm good. I'm up in Belfast. I've been here for the last couple of days. My sister lives up here now, so I was just up visiting her and working out of an Airbnb today. And yeah, missed the big storm down on the west coast.
Well, yeah, and you missed the big storm on the east coast as well. It was pretty damn windy this morning.
Yeah,
Storm
Debbie,
they're calling it. Storm Debbie. Yeah.
My fiance's mom's name's Debbie, so it's kind of funny.
I won't go ask any more questions about the storm association there, but
it's just funny. Debbie's lovely.
It's funny. I didn't until I moved over here 3 years ago. I didn't really appreciate where names of storms come from, and I now understand that if it's a storm that develops in the Atlantic, then the Irish Met Service get to name the storm.
Yeah, I just thought it was the weather woman named the storm.
Yeah.
She's just there on Tuesday going, it's Storm Johnny.
No, but I honestly did wonder why all the storms had kind of Irish names.
Oh, really?
And yeah, a lot of them will have, Storm Ciarán or I was about to say Storm Paddy, but that's very kind of a little bit cliched. So, but yeah, no, I didn't realize because if they develop in the Atlantic, then they get a name. They get named by the Irish Met, and then that carries on all the way through the UK and Europe. They don't rename them.
It's probably just because we see it first.
Exactly. Yeah.
Our Met offices are informing all of Europe as to what's going on.
Yeah, you see the big black clouds coming over to Ireland, and then they dump everything on Ireland, and then pick up a bit over the Irish Sea, dump it on Wales and the Lake District, and then go over to Europe where they give it snow. Anyway,
sunshine, yeah.
Give it snow. So this week we were going to. Well, we decided, didn't we? We were talking. We've had a good first 6 episodes of talking kind of like random stuff, and we have decided that we're going to try and do one technical focused pod every week, and one kerfuffle every week.
So one for those, is going to be about stuff that's of value, and the other is going to be rage bait.
Rage bait, yeah. Hopefully the technical one will be like even-sided, and Ailín and I, we have nothing to argue over or opinionated on, and then the kerfuffle episode.
Oh, we just pretend to be on opposite sides for the...
Exactly, yeah. So this week is a technical one. We say it's technical. I think we've talked about how sometimes it's hard. Like, we're called the visual div. We use a visual no coding tool,
and we're an hour experience.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is so ironic.
Yeah, we'll do our best to paint a picture with our voices of the technical elements that we're going to talk about.
Jesus, poetry. That's just poetry.
Poetry. Let's give it a best shot.
Well, like, the thing is that we usually chat about problems, or not problems, just things that we're working on. And so this last week, I was using conditional visibility to solve a problem. And it was just like, the thing is still there. So when I say the thing is still there, I was trying to hide something or filter something using conditional visibility, and it's still in the HTML. And I did know this at one stage, but I forgot about it. And it kind of caught me off. And it was
it does, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, because I think that's one of the things with how we develop with Webflow. And this is like, you and I would talk about this, like having an understanding of HTML and CSS and a rudimentary understanding of JavaScript they are important in Webflow because, like, again, you don't need these things until there's a problem, and then when there's a problem, you need them. So for this particular one, I'll try and tell you what I was doing. So before you and I were, um, Ben asked us about how to have a static item that would be in like a list with CMS items. It's quite difficult in Webflow. If you have your static item, you can align them side by side, but the divs are going to mean that it's two separate divs are going to mean that there's going to be a gap underneath the static item. So how do you get a static item into a list item? So that's what I was trying to solve. And there's a solution out there with, like FinSuite have a solution. And I wrote a script in using Slater, and it solved the problem. It put the static item into the list. So what I had was I have a dashboard, and the dashboard button was static, and then I've a list of dashboards going through the Webflow CMS. And they're the other buttons, and that worked really well. What the problem is that it was creating a flicker on page load because I was using a document. The JavaScript was waiting for the page to load, and then it would pull the static item and put it into the list. And it would always, on first page load, it would create a flicker. So I was trying to remove that flicker. And the solution I came up with, which I was super proud of myself, was you can put two items. So I have my two items into each CMS item. So I put two buttons into the CMS item. So one of them was connected dynamically to the CMS, and that did what I wanted with the CMS. And the other was just static. So what that means is you have the same static button repeating throughout the list of CMS items. Right?
Yeah, so you have two buttons per item, essentially. Yeah.
Two buttons per item. So I used conditional visibility, and this particular one I was using an index, but you could use a toggle. And like, let's say use a toggle is static button. And if static button is on, you show the static button. And if static button is off, you just show the list. So I was like, brilliant, a Webflow solution for a Webflow problem. And, there's limitations with that as well, but it was doing what I wanted. I was like, sweet, I've got rid of my flicker. But now I ended up with twice the amount of buttons in the HTML, because when you render that, even though on the front end it looks like there's a static button that says dashboard, and then it's like dashboard 1, dashboard 2, dashboard 3, which are CMS buttons, this in the HTML, it's still rendered both buttons per CMS item. So I was like, how do I figure that out? Like, and why? Not just how do I figure it out? It's just like I forgot about it, because what Webflow does is they add this class called W conditional visibility, which sets the item to display none. So it sets it to display none, which means it's still in the HTML. It's not removed from the DOM. So yeah.
Yeah. So to explain that a little bit further is, because they put a class of W condition invisible.
Condition visibility, yeah. Invisibility.
Invisible, yeah.
Invisible.
They then have a
Sounds
CSS
like a
attribute.
Superhero conditions.
Invincibility. So they've got this class, and the value of that class is simply display is none, which basically means it isn't displayed and it's hidden from view, but it's still there. So if you're if you inspect the item in the browser, if you look for it with code, if Google goes in and crawls your website, everyone and anything could see this button, essentially, this extra button, and it can cause issues. One, it's really not what you want, because you don't want this button to be shown to anyone or anything. But one of the biggest things it does or doesn't do is help with accessibility. So when someone is tabbing through um, um, using their keyboard, then this item is available for that tab, and therefore it becomes a thing. It will say that it's not visible, but it's a thing that someone has to tab through. But
Yeah.
also, it has bigger implications in that, say you weren't just having a button, you might have an image, for example,
Mm.
or a few images, and you start using what they call conditional visibility on these relatively heavy images. You're starting to have pages that maybe only show one image, but they've got another 8 images loaded onto the DOM in the background that are just being hidden from view. So the whole page weight, everything that has to come from the server is just bloated, unneededly bloated. And I guess what we're getting into here is the difference between even before we look at how Webflow call these things from a visibility point of view, we're looking at client side I guess logic and server side logic. So if you have server side logic, i.e. everything is the logic is executed before it gets to the browser, then those images could be removed from the HTML, and none of those images would appear. Like your second button wouldn't appear. But because Webflow uses server side, client side, they call it client side, which is the browser. Client side rendering logic here, it means that all the HTML goes up, and then when it gets there, the CSS hides that element. Which is, it's common. It's just common practice to know whether you want it to be hidden on the server side or the client side. It's like, I know you use MemberStack a lot, and tools like MemberStack and Outsetter and Webflow memberships, they use a combination of client side and server side logic to give you access to certain bits of content. And they have pros and cons of, why they do it another way. But from a simple point of view, you've got the idea that Webflow's UI are trying to give us the power to show and hide stuff, but some of the ways they do it is done on the server side, and some of the ways they do it is done on the client side, and it's not immediately clear which is which when you just look at the UI, is it? As you found out when you're doing your buttons.
Yeah, so it's like it looks like the thing is being filtered or disappears, but it's still there. And it gets confusing because when you use so I had a CMS item and a CMS list, and there's tons of other. There might have been, I think there's 7 options, but I might have 10 in the CMS itself, but not all of them are published. So there's an example of if those things aren't published, they're not actually showing in the HTML. Or when you go into the actual CMS pages, you're able to filter based off of that use conditions to filter the CMS items, and those items actually don't show in the HTML. It's only when you're using something like conditional visibility that it adds this class which sets it to display none. So it's the difference between just using display none and something actually filtering out of the HTML. But when you're building in Webflow, it looks the exact same. And it's actually only until you publish your site that you notice the difference. And that might actually be the thing that's a little bit tricky here, is that when you're developing, oh yeah, they both look the exact same, and you don't have a way of inspecting your elements on Webflow. And all this hidden Webflow CSS, like all the W classes, they don't tell you that they're adding them, but they're just there. They just do their thing, and it's not until you publish and inspect, and why would you inspect unless there's a problem? I inspect because I make sure that my products have a really high Google Lighthouse score. But with this particular one, I can't even remember why I was inspecting it. Maybe I was actually using the tab feature to see what was going on and noticed that it was disappearing. But yeah, I think it's a problem because I don't think if they're giving us this kind of power or this functionality, it shouldn't be rendering into HTML. Like if we can't see it, it shouldn't render unless you specifically create a class called display none. Then I don't think it should. It should
Yeah,
render.
I think you're right. I think if you take a step back of like from what we think they should be doing is if you look at the collection lists, so you have filters, sort orders,
Mm-hmm.
and say limit items. As you said, like those three elements there, when you say, okay, only show a field if it matches a certain value, then on the server that logic is executed, and
Mm-hmm.
only the HTML or the list items that match that go up into the browser. The same with sort order. The sorting is done on the server side. Same with
Mm-hmm.
limiting items. Like if you say, okay, only limit it to 6 items, it only sends up 6 items in that HTML. So there's no possibility for anything on the front end. Like if you had some JavaScript, you can't access another 6 because they're not there. They're on the server. So you would have to go into the server, maybe an API call or something like that to get them. When it comes to components, that's the same. It's called visibility and user access. So you can toggle visibility. There's certain nuances with toggling, but when it says visibility and it says, what does it say, hidden, visible and hidden,
Mm-hmm.
those are done on the server side. So there's you're getting a safety net here. You go, okay, if I say it's hidden, it's not on the dot. It's not coming up into the browser. It's just hidden. It's not even served onto the browser. Now, weirdly, the word hidden implies that something is there and it's being covered over. It's not like served or not served. So there's even complications there in the language. But then as you found out, if you go onto the CMS template page and it says conditional visibility, exactly the same as a filter, show if the field equals a certain value, that just applies the class W condition invisible. So it's treating different instances of what you think is the same in different ways on the front end. And that's, aside from how they should do it, it's just not consistent, which is, we have found that in certain elements that get released, new features, sometimes people find inconsistencies. But this one has been there ever since I've used Webflow. It hasn't, I don't know if there must be a reason. We'd love, hey, Webflow, next time dial in 0800 121 600 and it'd be good to have someone
Don't dial to
who
that. I'm
explains
massively
why.
tired after it. It's like Matt's like 500 euros an hour free phone call. But yeah, it'd be
Well,
cool.
we did talk about how to make money out of this podcast, and a premium number could be a way forward.
The support call for Webflow execs.
Yeah, can you hold the line, please? €2 a minute. Happy days.
Brilliant.
I know. I'll write that down. Actually, that's a great idea. Yeah,
We're
sod
a support channel for
Patreon.
Webflow.
Who needs Patreon when you have a premium call-in number?
Yeah.
We could get maybe a percentage of the transatlantic fees as well. Maybe do a deal.
This is you're the ideas, man.
I'm the ideas man. We can talk about that another day. But yeah, I think it is baffling. It is baffling because as you're working on projects, you just power through this stuff, don't you? And you go, okay, I note that for next time. And then more often than not, you're working on similar projects. But if you get to a point where you're working on a big project and that doesn't come up for a while, and then you return to it, you have to sense check yourself and go, oh, okay, conditional visibility is client side and component visibility is server side and filters are server side. And that's only because, as you said, like you have an interest in keeping the performance of your page efficient. But let's call it a layman, but someone picking up Webflow for the first time, and I know it's a dev tool, and we we must make sure that we agree with the fact that it is a dev tool. It's not a design tool. It is a dev tool. It is misleading. It's not helping people learn what visibility is, or display none has an impact, and all the pros and cons of display none. And it's definitely a problem. I didn't think it was until you raised it, Ailín, and I was like, this is we talk. It's not that interesting, but actually, it's pretty interesting.
There, the inner nerd comes out. Well, I think the thing that you said there hits the nail on the head. It's the inconsistency of language, or the inconsistency of explanation as to what's going on, because like there is that visibility option that's in under the settings, which removes the elements from the DOM. And like, so I'll just give an example. We've all done this where we've built something and we're building out a new section, but you don't want to display it. You don't want to publish it yet. So you hide it and then you publish, because you're in the middle of working, especially with Webflow. Like, we don't have, you can't, if you publish, you're publishing everything. You can't just publish one page. Like, you can't stop a page from being published. So we've used these workarounds. And up until recently, what we had to do was always like give something a class of hidden, or which was set to display none, which is really poor, because it means it's still there, stuff you're working on. Like, and if we'll go simple idea here, a marketing website with a Christmas special. You don't want it to be going out till December, and we're still in November now, but you're building it and you're working on it, and then someone notices a bug on another page. So you have to hide that work on that page and then publish everything else. But it's still there. It's like someone can find that coupon, that voucher, whatever, find out what you're doing. Now, the thing where you go into settings and you've got you can hide something. You can actually like hide that element and take it away from the DOM. As you said, it's the visibility option where you got visible and hidden. Now that actually removes it. So it's not there. It doesn't render into HTML. So yeah, it's the understanding of that is, I think it's really important. But this we've just flipped. I'm like, Webflow needs to teach people about this, because the language is so similar. Like conditional visibility and visible, like user access, visibility, and hidden. It's too similar. They're too close to each other. I completely got blindsided there by this one last week. And I'll tell you how. Like, so I'm still using it. I'm still using that option of conditional visibility, but I've written a small script that says the class of W conditional invisible. If you find that, remove it. So I've written a JavaScript script that says, so once the document is loaded, remove that element, or all those.
Okay, elements. So remove that element. Now
it's still client side. It's not server side.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to work out, that might have an impact, say, on something like a filtering system, for example. It might. But it's the fact that you need to do that is a little bit disturbing. Because I'll give you an example of where I've used it, and actually I saw a sort of what's the word? I saw an insight into someone else using this for blog posts that have a lot of different layouts. So a good example is you might have 500 different blog posts, and the client goes, okay, I want the category of food to have a certain layout. So if this article is a food category, it has a certain layout, and it has 3 images in the hero instead of 1 image. But if it's drink, it has no image, and it had da-da-da. But it's all under the same collection. And we know that Webflow has limitations in how you can organize things by categories, even though... Anyway, I remember seeing a tweet, actually a couple of days ago, Grace Walker was talking about how she was maxing out the number of fields that she was using in the CMS. And related to that is the fact that often happens when someone's trying to put lots of little toggles, little options for the editor or the marketing person to control the way the page looks. It's the same, like table of contents. If it's a certain length, put a table of contents in. If it's not, but you sometimes give that control to the editor. So you max out these fields, and then you realize that when you put this template together, that actually everything is on show.
Mm.
It's just the ones that you didn't want on show are actually just display none, hidden from the user's eyes. But they're not hidden from the DOM. They're not taken out of the DOM. So you could actually have a huge page with lots of layouts and assets coming in, and all the user is seeing is the ones that you didn't hide with display none. But actually, from a Google point of view, SEO, it's crawling all this stuff. Okay, there is signals with some of the CSS. Google does take, I'm not a massive expert on how that works, but we'll have to get Search Historian to give us a bit of advice on that front. But the idea being that you are over engineering a page and then serving it to the user, and they're getting everything apart from a few little bits are hidden away. And that's just inefficient from page speed, from asset serving, from the ability to control stuff. If editors are, they might not tick a toggle, and then before you know it, boom, it's shown on the front end. Or if someone wants to hide stuff that's sensitive, then someone could actually see that. If they're going into an inspect, they could see that information, even though the editor might think that they're hiding it. I guess, like, thinking on top of the head, though, instead of calling it conditional visibility, they should just call it display none. And just display none if this value equals that value. Job done. Everything else in the Webflow UI is related as closely as possible to the way it's actually called in when you use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay, styles and classes. We went into that a couple of weeks ago. Classes are called styles when there's but you got IDs, you got things like flex. If a layman goes, what is flex? Well, you get to know what it is. So if someone was saying, oh, what is display none? They'll get to know what it is just by using it and seeing how it works. So there's definitely a call for renaming these things.
Yeah, maybe like conditional display, but then you go down the avenue of, when it's conditional display, like, is it just display block or is it display none? Like, it's more, maybe it's like conditional display none. It gets complex because it's not a conditional display, because there's multiple display options. It's just, are you adding this class that gives it a display none? It gets, like, the language gets long, I suppose. But there should definitely be differentiation between the visibility and the conditional visibility.
Yeah, and if you think about how it's used in the UI, that display settings, including display none, are in the styles panel.
Yep.
Whereas conditional visibility, even though it's applying styles, is in the settings panel.
It is.
Which is,
and you're right, and it's underneath the visibility, which is the DOM visibility. It's like below it. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, you assume it. Now, settings isn't to say that settings is...
Even a few weeks ago, I said it to you that the way I look at Webflow is that this element here is CSS, and then you go behind to the settings. I always thought of that as more of like a JavaScript kind of settings panel. So that straight away, that's exactly why I mucked this up and forgot about it.
And you assumed that it was doing what it said on the tin, which was part of settings. It was, yeah. Hey, to be fair, I didn't realize there was so much under the hood of this. I was, when you suggested let's talk about visibility, I was thinking, oh gee, here we go. How are we going to do this? But
and I didn't even. I was just thinking of my particular use case, but like when you just touched on SEO there, and you said that Google does recognize like the display settings, but like if you had multiple sections that were controlled through a toggle and controlled through conditional visibility, and there was multiple H2s followed by text, if those H2s were empty, or if those H2s had some text in there like lorem ipsum, and it wasn't the answer of the paragraph wasn't connected, like you are going to get penalized. And even if like probably the thing that I could see as worse is your load speed. Like all those images that would be hidden there, you could have multiple images, and like if you're even kind of thinking like if you would try and speed up your page and you inspect it and there's Google Lighthouse and you're saying, where are these images? Like, why are all these images showing up? I thought I set them to display none or to conditional visibility none. Like that would be such a pain in the ass. And
Yeah, I've definitely got to dig into that a little bit, because I remember the dark old days of SEO sort of. I think they call it, what do they call it? White hat, grey hat, black hat. Is that was like you would have a blog post, and at the bottom of the page they would do a display none and just pack it full of keywords. The idea
yeah,
being that the Google robots would read it, but the person reading the article wouldn't need to see all of those things.
yeah.
So I would imagine Google has caught up a little bit with that
Oh,
approach,
100%. There's so many people
which
got
means
done.
that display none for Google's bots mean that they don't look at that content,
I'd
or
say
does it?
penalized.
Well, maybe it. Well, that's right. Maybe it started to ignore it, or did it start to penalize? I don't know. I don't know enough about that. It's a good. I should know enough about that, but I don't know enough about that.
Now, the way I would look at it is if Google Lighthouse says it's there and doing something inaccurate, you have to remove it. And that's it. Like, and if there's something in there, like if the H2 is not connected, if there's a H3 followed by a H2 instead of a H4, if there's a H4 higher than a H2, like all of these things, I would 100% be listening to what Google Lighthouse is doing. Like, as you know, you and I were not SEO experts in this, but I wouldn't play with fire with that kind of stuff. And it also, well, I keep coming back to like it's not accessible, so it's a bad product, and someone is going to go on the product and not be able to fully consume what the product is doing, and they're going to have difficulties because they're the tools that they're using will read those H2s, will find those buttons that are hidden, and that's not a good experience. So I don't see how it couldn't penalize you.
Yeah, I just pulled up a bit of Moz forum content there, and it says it does crawl it, but it applies less weighting to any content that is display none. But it's clever enough to understand when it's done for a design reason, and it won't penalize you if unless it thinks you're trying to manipulate the system. So yeah, so maybe an image, it might not penalize you, but if it's a piece of content, a piece of text, it might penalize you. Either way, not having control over your choice of whether to put it on or not is it's not even the choice. It might not be possible. It's just the clarity of choice. If you know what you're doing and you press a button and you think, okay, that's a conditional visibility and the same as the other visibility, then I've worked it out. Happy days. I can tell the client, no problem. They can write their articles this way and we can put the toggles in. But
It's
if
like
they
a tongue
don't,
twister, isn't it? Are we talking about conditional visibility? Are we talking about visibility? Are we talking about filters? So confused.
they need to make conditional visibility more visible. No, that's yeah.
Oh, nice. That we're definitely clipping that, and we're putting that onto the talk tick.
We need who are the guys who do the videos for Webflow? Maguire, who's not there anymore. But that team need to maybe do a fun what visibility means, what conditional visibility means, just to see if they can, bring it to life in a bit more of a clear manner than we can.
Yeah,
Maybe
maybe.
we're just getting. Then it maybe that would be a big seller, a Chrome extension that changes the word conditional visibility to display none.
Or you could just use Slater and write a small script that says if you find W conditional invisibility, remove it. Remove the element. It's still
Yeah, I think.
it's still client side, but at least it's gone.
But would you get a repaint though then? I suppose you wouldn't get a repaint because it's not showing, but there might be a situation where it does have an impact on.
Yeah,
Would the
if you're
page need to repaint itself? Yeah.
if you go onto a browser where someone has JavaScript disabled, then yeah, you're in trouble there. But
Then you
I think that
then you're in. Yeah.
you're kind of in that territory with a lot of Webflow products because it's also JavaScript based anyway. Um,
Yeah.
so
Very true.
you're yeah, you're in tricky territory if there's a browser not rendering JavaScript.
Yeah, it's interesting. It'd be also good to see how I know we talked about it before, like how the likes of FinSuite and JetBoost and Wizzed, like how these tools that are interacting with the DOM based on user interactions and or pulling from databases. I guess it's the same with MemberStack and AppSetter and those kind of guys. Is that
Yeah.
like how they see that how they see that in their world? Do they have that as a primary concern? Is making sure that they abide by the best practices of what's on the page, what's crawlable, the accessibility of that content, and how
So
that works. So then they're not using similar techniques.
well, with MemberStack, um, with MemberStacks, this if there's items that are because with MemberStack you've got data attributes, and those data attributes will display content based on whether or not a member is logged in or not. So let's say you've got a member from Ireland and a member from the US. If the member has signed up through the Irish version, they'll see Irish content because you can give the correct data attribute. And similarly, someone from the US. But that has to be that's client side. So that is removing the elements because the elements are there on Webflow, and then we publish our site,
Yeah.
and then MemberStack is on top of that. So it's removing those elements after page load or after MemberStack has loaded. When it comes to Wiz doesn't use the Webflow CMS. It uses a third-party CMS like Xano or Airtable. So it's doing the opposite. So after a page, after your website, your Webflow product is loaded, and after Wiz has loaded, then it pulls that content based on logic and attributes onto your Webflow template. So it's two different ways of looking at it. So if you're, I suppose the way you kind of have to think about it, if you're using the Webflow CMS, that's those CMS, and you're using a third party to manipulate content depending on a user's experience. Webflow is going to load that first, and then you have to remove it. So that's a client side solution using JavaScript. Whereas with Wiz, what they're kind of doing is it's the other way around. It's like this what you want to be displayed has been loaded based on who the user is. It's not in Webflow. It's been pulled from a third party database.
So
So
yeah,
it's
so that's a server side
there's is more of a
logic
server
essentially.
side. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And I didn't realize the other day, but Webflow memberships is a server side. Employs a lot of server side logic as well, rather than, as you said, MemberStack, etc. sit on top, so the page is served and then they add to or take away, whereas Webflow will just not serve that data. So it's a very different way. So I think like maybe it should just, if it's part of the CMS, just do it server side. If it's that's kind of feels like a nice line in the sand to draw. I'm sure there are reasons. Those guys over there are very clever. I'm sure there's a reason why they've done it the way they've done it.
You just made
But
me
yeah,
go,
it
I
still
need
is
to
confusing.
move to Webflow membership now. Like it's so true. Like if the Webflow membership has that power of server side, it has a better use case. Even though like the other
It does, yeah. It does, but it's obviously the other bits on top of that start, they're not quite there yet. So but yeah, great discussion. Great
good.
discussion. And like
That's
yeah,
hilarious
no, I
because
enjoyed
you were
that.
like literally like, no, we're not talking about this. And I was just like, it's Monday. I can't talk about anything else. It's the only thing I'm thinking about. Imagine that. That's all I could think about over the
Well,
weekend was conditional visibility, isn't it? It's still there.
Yeah, I was worried about your energy levels this morning. I wanted to talk about side projects, and Ailín texted me. I'm not feeling it this morning.
Yeah, I don't want to talk
And
about the things that I haven't done.
yeah. But then likewise, you said, "Hey, let's talk about conditional visibility," and I was like, "I don't think I can do this. I don't like. We've had a good run of this, but this could be the end of the pod if we. I don't want to talk about this just. But actually, I've enjoyed this. It's given me the technical sessions might be something I look forward to now.
Yeah, good. Because I like talking shite about this nerdy stuff. And hopefully it'll actually. We need to. There was a guy on a couple of weeks ago on Twitter. I saw him asking about this. He was coming across the same problem, and you responded to him. Actually, he had some issues with like location-based conditional visibility, and it was going to affect his SEO because he didn't want certain content showing in certain locations. And then he realized that on the HTML, it was all still there. So yeah, write a script that says, if you find the class W conditional invisible, W condition invisible, remove that element. And you can use Slater to write that script for you.
Yeah, there we go. There's our sponsor coming through.
You said last week that we were in the top 10 podcasts in Ireland, and now we're going to make loads of money. It's just resting in your account, isn't it?
Yeah, that was. I was following on from what I showed my wife and my mum, which was it shows you the latest podcast downloaded in your podcast library, and we were at the top, so it looked like we were number one.
We're number one for your mum and your
yeah. I think, like, you know, and this is I'll tell the audience if they've got this far, well done. I've been surprised how I've told you this before, but I've been surprised how excited you get about the stats that we get through on the back end of our podcast hosting software. I would say sometimes every half an hour I get, we've just passed 159 downloads, and then 20 minutes later we're at 170. This piece of content is our best yet. And I thought I'd be that guy because I used to work in media. I do love a good spreadsheet. I thought I'd be the co-host getting excited about that. But yeah, like, it's pretty amazing. Hey,
it's been so exciting though. Like, it's been such a buzz, you know, like considering it was just this idea to fuck it, let's do it kind of thing. Sure, it'll be grand. Like, wow, how bad could it be? Let's just put it out there and see what happens. I've been pretty blown away by the response and been really, I've been buzzing off it, to be fair. It's been great. So,
like some of them, like, okay, there are nice people in the world. What's that?
I said thank you to everybody for listening to us.
Oh no, honestly, like, people who are listening to us, and then there are people who actually take time out of their day, and they're not just going, "Hey, thanks for the pod." They're writing really nice, thoughtful messages and picking out stuff, and it's across Twitter, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, and it's as you said, it gives you that little boost because, you know, there's not many people in my household who can listen to me for more than 5 minutes before they tell me to shut up. So to see that
everybody who's listened to me and Matt talk for more than 5
exactly minutes. We're going over to see my mum for a week, and it's common knowledge since I've been about 8 years old, there'll be a point in every dinner table conversation that she will have to step in and go, Matthew, enough now, Matthew. So yeah, Matthew, as you say, yeah. Matthew, yeah.
All right, look.
Right. But yeah, no, thank you everyone for listening. And as a result of all your downloads, I've lost the bet, and I will be joining Ailín on the West Coast for a surf. Let's not call it a lesson. Let's call it a surf experience induction, dunking sometime in the new year. So
yeah, good stuff. All right.
Yeah.
That's great.
Right. Catch you later. Okay.
Bye. Good luck. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. 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 Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.